In tonight's news, in the first direct U.S. assault on the Syrian army in 6 years, U.S. cruise missiles attack a military base near Homs, and the Syrian army says at least 6 people are killed. Russia suspends an air safety cooperation agreement with the United States, originally drawn up to ensure that the two countries' planes do not collide over Syria. And a terrorist attack in Sweden kills at least 3 people and wounds 8 others, also drawing international condemnation and EU support to Stockholm. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. We begin with Jordan and China celebrating 40 years of bilateral ties. On this occasion, His Majesty King Abdullah and Chinese President Xi Jinping exchanged congratulatory letters as the two countries celebrate 40 years of diplomatic ties. His Majesty highlighted the strong bilateral relations, especially in the economic field, stressing the importance of the landmark strategic partnership agreement that was signed between Jordan and China in 2015. President Xi said China is committed to expanding strategic ties with Jordan, especially with respect to coordination and consultation on regional and international issues. Following 6 years of war, divided Syrians were split over a U.S. strike on a military airbase near Homs this morning, with residents in rebel-held areas cautiously welcoming the attack, while Damascus residents decrying it as a Western aggression. Syrian state television showed footage of the aftermath of the strike, saying 9 civilians, including 4 children, were killed, many others wounded, and homes in the area were damaged. U.S. President Donald Trump had ordered the cruise missile attack in response to the Syrian military's suspected role in a poison gas attack on Tuesday that killed at least 70 people. It was the first direct U.S. assault on the Syrian army in the 6-year conflict. The Syrian army called the attack blatant aggression and said it made the United States a partner of terrorist groups, including Daesh. Minister of Foreign and Expatriate Affairs Ayman al-Safadi, who was tonight's guest on JTV's 60 Minutes, while reiterating Jordan's calls for a political solution to the Syria crisis, said today's U.S. strikes intended to make a clear statement against the use of chemical weapons.
Jordan's position in Syria have been crystal clear. We want an end to the crisis. We want an end to the catastrophe that the Syrian crisis has become. We want a political solution that would end the suffering of the Syrian people and would meet the aspirations of the Syrian people as such. The military strike today was a response to the chemical attack. It was a message that such atrocities will not be tolerated. We know it is a targeted, it's one-time attack in reaction to that atrocity, and now I think the focus should be on pivoting back towards Geneva with a view to achieving a political solution that would be realized through the cooperation of all parties concerned.
A government statement earlier renewed its denouncement of the use of weapons of mass destruction, including the recent chemical attack in Khan Sheikhoun in the Syrian province of Idlib. Minister of State for Media Affairs and Communications Mohammed al-Momeni described the use of chemical weapons as a heinous attack against humanity, saying it triggered world condemnation, culminating in the U.S. missile airstrikes on the Syrian airbase. Momeni urged the international community to exert all efforts to stop violence against civilians and innocent people. Russia suspended an air safety cooperation agreement with the United States, originally drawn up to ensure that the two countries' planes do not collide over Syria. A spokesman for the Russian President Vladimir Putin told reporters that Russia would keep military channels of communications open with Washington, but would not exchange any information through them. Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev said the U.S. cruise missile strikes are one step away from clashing with the Russian military. The Defense Ministry spokesman Major General Igor Konashenkov said the U.S. had grossly violated the framework of the agreement. He said accusations by the United States of alleged violation of the 2013 Convention on Banning Chemical Weapons were made in order to justify the strikes.
I want to draw your attention that right after the massive strikes on the Syrian airbase, Islamic State and Jabhat al-Nusra military units launched a wide-scale assault on Syrian troops' positions. We hope these actions by fighters have not been agreed with the American side.
While residents in Damascus were defiant and decried the U.S. cruise missile attack on the airbase near Homs, the Syrian opposition applauded the attack. The opposition says one attack is not enough to stop the Syrian military from hitting rebel-held areas. The UN Political Affairs Chief Jeffrey Feltman said immediate action is needed to protect the Syrian people, but it should be rooted in the principles of the United Nations and international law. He told the UN Security Council there can be no genuine protection if the parties to the conflict, government and opposition alike, are permitted to act with impunity. But not only Syrians were divided over the US attack, as mixed reactions came from across the world. Here's more.
As the world reeled from the horrific images of the chemical attack on Khan Sheikhoun in Syria's Idlib province, no one expected the swift reaction of US President Donald Trump, who launched a missile strike on a Syrian airbase from which the chemical attack was reportedly launched. The United Nations refrained from commenting on the White House's decision.
What we have seen overnight appears to be a military decision, military strategic decision, which we cannot comment on as such as humanitarians.
A spokeswoman for the United Nations said the special envoy to Syria is following the situation closely.
The special envoy is following closely the situation, including through consultations with relevant interlocutors. The United Nations will provide additional comments on this issue as more information is brought to bear.
The International Committee of the Red Cross told reporters following the first direct U.S. assault on the Syrian army since the beginning of the 6 years of civil war that the situation in Syria is amounting to an international armed conflict. The main concern of the Red Cross, the statement said, is for civilians who must be spared and protected under international humanitarian law. The EU offered only cautious endorsement of the U.S. missile strikes, but said that they understood efforts to deter any more chemical attacks. European Council President Donald Tusk said on Twitter that the U.S. strikes on a Syrian airbase showed the West's resolve against chemical attacks. Britain, for its part, said Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has been put on notice by the U.S. airstrike. Britain's UN Ambassador Matthew Rycroft described the attack as a proportionate response to unspeakable acts. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said the missile strike, which she described as limited and targeted, was understandable given the Syrian people's suffering. She also urged all parties to return to the negotiating table.
I underline that it remains more and more important and right to focus all the attention on political talks in the UN Security Council and in Geneva in order to reach a political transitional solution in Syria.
China also urged all parties in Syria to find a political settlement to the crisis. Since the beginning of the conflict, China has routinely sided with Russia in blocking action by the UN Security Council on Syria, and Beijing's special envoy for the Syrian crises has praised Russia's military role there as effective in combating international terrorism. Iraqis reeling under war and terror attacks themselves criticized the strike, saying the move would have a negative impact on the fight against Daesh. Iraqis said the US president used the chemical attack as an excuse to target the Syrian regime, while he was supposed to further enhance support for Syria and Iraq in their fight against the terrorist group. Syrian refugees in Lebanon received the news of the US attack with mixed reactions. But Lebanese President Michel Aoun made reference to international treaties that prohibit the use of weapons of mass destruction. He said Lebanon, as a signatory of all international agreements on non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, condemns the use of such weapons in any shape or form and calls on the international community to urge Israel and other states that have not signed to commit to the articles of those agreements. In the end, despite the different reactions of the world body to the US's missile strike, there is one thing that all agreed on, which is alleviating the suffering of Syria's people. Nancy Khair for the news at 10.
During the past days, Arab and international media's attention focused on His Majesty King Abdullah's visit to the United States and his talks with U.S. President Donald Trump, who applauded His Majesty's efforts towards peace in the Middle East and pledged U.S. continued support to the kingdom. His Majesty's diplomacy in the U.S. was the topic of tonight's 60 Minutes program, where Foreign Minister Ayman al-Safadi gave an overview of the outcomes of this landmark visit. In a statement to the news at 10, he described the visit as very successful.
It was an extremely successful visit. The meetings His Majesty held with President Trump were extremely fruitful in terms of agreeing on mechanisms to address the common challenges that we face together and also work on the opportunities that exist as a result of cementing the strong and solid partnership that Jordan and the United States have historically had. They addressed the issue of terrorism, and there was one stand on the need to defeat terrorism on all military, security and ideological front. We were extremely grateful of the commitment that Mr. Trump made in relation to achieving the Palestinian-Israeli peace. As you know, this is a priority for Jordan. His Majesty sees the Palestinian-Israeli conflict as the core conflict in the region, and the resolution of that conflict is the key to achieving peace and stability. So they had some extremely useful talks on how to go forward. The bottom line is that there is a U.S. commitment to, by the President himself, unwavering commitment to achieving Palestinian-Israeli peace. And of course, Jordan is there to support. We believe that peace is a necessity for the whole region, and we think the Arab Peace Initiative, which the Arab Summit had just relaunched, is a comprehensive framework for achieving that lasting and comprehensive peace. On other issues, there was also a discussion of bilateral relations. As you know, the U.S. Jordanian ties are growing. There's a tremendous amount of financial aid that the U.S. provides to Jordan, and we're looking forward to renewing the memorandum of understanding under which the U.S. supports Jordan's financial growth and economic needs. So all in all, it was an extremely successful visit. On all fronts, there is a commitment in working together towards making this part of the world a safer, a better, and more prosperous world.
To the situation in Iraq, where Iraqi forces on the edge of Mosul's old city are standing ready to storm Daesh's stronghold. A federal police brigadier general said the army have prepared new plans to storm the old city and are now awaiting orders to go ahead. The forces are trying to advance through the narrow maze-like streets towards the symbolic Al-Nuri Mosque, where Daesh leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi declared a caliphate in 2014. But progress is much slower than in the early phases of the campaign, during which the Iraqi army took nearly 3/4 of the city within 5 months. The front line has hardly moved in the past 3 weeks, and the terrorists, along with the roughly 400,000 residents, are trapped inside a ring of Iraqi troops. And a terrorist attack in Sweden killed 3 people and wounded 8 others, also drawing international condemnation. The attack in Stockholm earlier in the day occurred when a truck drove into a crowd on a shopping street and crashed into a department store, killing and wounding civilians. Parts of central Stockholm was cordoned off, and the area was evacuated, including the main train station. All subway traffic was also halted on orders from the police, who said no arrests were made in connection with the attack. There was also no immediate claim of responsibility. King Carl Gustaf expressed his horror at the attack. In Brussels, the European Union offered Sweden support and solidarity. On social media network Twitter, European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker wrote that an attack on any of our member states is an attack on us all, while European Council President Donald Tusk said, "My heart is in Stockholm," following what he called a terrible attack. In neighboring Norway, police announced in a tweet they will be carrying weapons until further notice in the country's largest cities and at Oslo's airport, while in Finland, police increased patrols in the capital, Helsinki. A meeting of G20 digital ministers has agreed on a drive for global internet access by 2025. According to Germany's economy minister, Brigitte Zypries, the ministers agreed that everybody should have access to the internet by 2025 and that another key priority is digital trade. The minister just last week said that Germany wants to use its presidency of the group of 20 major economies to promote fast internet for all, agree common technical standards, and promote lifelong digital learning.
We all want to get rid of this gender gap, as a matter of fact.
Nearly 7,000 people stood on decorated punts, canoes and flowery boats getting ready to take part in the annual Qintong Boat Festival in China. The festival in Jiangsu province attracts over 300,000 spectators annually from nearby villages and towns to cheer participants. Some 400 boats took part in the festival. The event dates back over 800 years when villagers boated on rivers to worship soldiers who fought in wars against enemies, and in 2008 the festival was listed as a cultural heritage. In our fitness and well-being section, we highlight a sport that has been around for 2,000 years. Practiced initially by the ancient Greeks, gymnastics was a way to prepare for war and was also part of their young students' education. Tonight we focus on artistic gymnastics, which was introduced at the beginning of the 19th century. More in this report.
It is said skills learned in gymnastics can benefit a child's overall development. Incorporating strength, flexibility, speed, balance, coordination, power, and discipline, it would be hard to dispute that. For 3 days a week, for 90 minutes, these 8 to 9-year-old girls train in artistic gymnastics, which mainly focuses on strength, balance, and agility. They have been practicing the sport for many years, which is a good thing as it is especially recommended to start training early.
I recommend gymnastics from a young age, as we can develop strength if there is weakness and flexibility if there is inflexibility. Gymnastics can especially improve the neuromuscular control of kids with such weakness.
At 3 years old, for instance, kids get to learn a combination of skills as well as gymnastics terminology. As they get a bit older, Coach Suhail includes strength training and conditioning necessary to avoid injuries generally sustained from gymnastics and to protect their joints. Regular training can teach kids how to live a healthy lifestyle and remain involved in the sport as they get older. But gymnastics is no easy feat.
Honestly, it's difficult. It requires perseverance for one to keep going. It needs a lot of training and requires parents' cooperation, especially when it comes to kids' eating habits. They should watch their diet, especially as it is a difficult sport that requires a certain body for better performance.
Difficulty isn't stopping these girls, as gymnastics means a lot more.
It just makes me feel happy, it makes me feel free, and it makes me feel that I have something I can do, and that's something I love too.
It helped me build my confidence and my balance, and it helps me be more confident, because usually I'm shy. I like gymnastics because it makes me confident, it makes me express myself and makes me feel happy, and I feel like proud when I do it.
It's a way to show off, but in a safe manner.
I definitely want to be a gymnast, because sometimes having a really big talent and just keeping it private isn't that nice, but showing off your talent is fun.
Sometimes you could do backflips under the water or the pool, and you could go to your friend's house and do gymnastics. But to be careful, sometimes if you don't know how to do a move really good, don't do it on the floor, because maybe you'll fall and break your hand or something.
Involving children in sports is the best thing a parent can do. For these girls, it is gymnastics. For others, it could be anything else. It takes committed parents to have committed kids. Kids also emulate their parents. Wouldn't you want to be their healthy and active role model? This is Dana Abu Sham for the News at 10.
In tennis, Nick Kyrgios eased past John Isner 7-5, 7-6, 7-6 in a duel of big servers to fire Australia to a 2-love lead over the United States in their Davis Cup quarter-final in Brisbane. Kyrgios blasted 20 aces to Isner's 15, largely diffusing the towering American's serve to close out a slow-burning match in 2 hours and 24 minutes. Isner battled to the end, saving a match point at 6-5 to take the first set into the tiebreak, then charging into a 5-2 lead. But Kyrgios wrapped up the match in style, mowing through 5 straight points and sealing victory with a thundering ace. Serbia's Novak Djokovic beat Spain's Albert Ramos Vinolas in straight sets in the Davis Cup. Djokovic gave his country the perfect opening in front of a passionate home crowd in Belgrade with a relatively straightforward win of 6-3, 6-4, 6-2. It means Serbia go 1-up in the quarterfinal, with Victor Trojki due to take on Spaniard Pablo Carreno Busta in the best-of-5 series later today. And finally, the weather outlook. It remains relatively cold tonight in the hilly and desert areas and chilly in Amman with moderate winds. Tomorrow, spring conditions continue to prevail with warm weather expected in most parts, especially in the Jordan Valley and the Dead Sea. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect a warm day tomorrow with northerly moderate winds and calm seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. Before we end the news, here's a reminder of our top stories. In the first direct U.S. assault on the Syrian army in 6 years, U.S. cruise missiles attack a military base near Homs, and the Syrian army says at least 6 people are killed. Russia suspends an air safety cooperation agreement with the United States, originally drawn up to ensure that the two countries' planes do not collide over Syria. And a terrorist attack in Sweden kills at least 3 people and wounds 8 others, also drawing international condemnation and EU support to Stockholm. With this, we come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Dana Abu Sham. Thank you for watching and have a good night.